The drought had lasted 43 days. Wade Mercer knew because he'd marked each one in the ledger he kept inside the barn, right next to the columns tracking feed costs and cattle weights and all the other numbers that proved his ranch still existed, even when some mornings he wasn't entirely sure he did. 43 days without rain meant the creek ran shallow enough to see stones that normally stayed hidden. It meant dust devils dancing across the grazing fields every afternoon. It meant Wade spent an extra hour each evening hauling water from the well to supplement what the cattle couldn't get naturally, his shoulders burning, his hands blistered, his mind carefully empty of anything except the next task. That was how Wade survived the 3 years since Margaret died. One task, then another, never stopped long enough to feel anything. The ranch sat 8 miles outside Blackthorn Ridge, far enough that Wade could go weeks without seeing another human face if he planned carefully. The house was small but solid. Margaret had insisted on real glass windows instead of oiled paper, back when they'd first built the place together, back when Wade still believed planning for the future meant something. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that doubled as a sitting room, a porch that faced west toward mountains. He used to think were beautiful before they became just another feature of a landscape he'd stopped noticing. Caleb was 6 years old and looked exactly like his mother. Same dark hair that never laid flat, no matter how much water you used. Same serious gray eyes that watched everything twice as long as other children did. Same way of going completely silent when he was thinking hard about something, like words were too slow for whatever was happening inside his head. Wade loved his son the way you loved something that hurt to look at directly. Every time Caleb smiled, which wasn't often anymore, Wade saw Margaret smile. Every time the boy asked a question in that careful, thoughtful way of his, Wade heard Margaret's voice. It made him want to pull Caleb close, and also made him want to ride out to the far pasture and not come back until dark, until he'd worked himself too exhausted to feel the ache of all that accidental resemblance. So Wade kept himself busy. He fixed fences that didn't need fixing. He rode property lines that hadn't shifted. He invented tasks that filled hours and required just enough attention that thoughts couldn't intrude, and by the time he collapsed into bed each night, his body was too tired to dream, and that was exactly how he wanted it. But Caleb was starting to notice. "You ever going to talk again?" the boy asked one morning while Wade was checking the cattle in the south pasture. Wade glanced over, surprised. "I talk." "Not really." Caleb was sitting on the fence rail, bare feet swinging, watching his father with that unnervingly direct stare children used before they learned to hide what they were thinking. "You say stuff like, 'eat your breakfast,' or 'finish your chores,' but you don't actually talk. Mama used to talk." The comment landed like a fist to the sternum. Wade opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I talk," he repeated, which even to his own ears sounded pathetic. Caleb shrugged and went back to watching the cattle, and Wade felt something ugly twist in his chest, shame maybe, or guilt, or just the exhausted recognition that he was failing at something important but didn't have enough left inside him to figure out what. That was a Tuesday. By Friday, they needed supplies. Wade hated going into town, hated the way people looked at him with that careful mix of pity and discomfort, like grief was contagious if you acknowledged it directly. Hated the questions disguised as concern. "How you holding up?" and "That boy doing all right?" And the worst one, always delivered with a sympathetic head tilt. "You need anything?" What Wade needed was for Margaret to not be dead. What Wade needed was to stop waking up every morning surprised all over again that she wasn't in bed next to him. What Wade needed was for time to move faster or slower or just different, because 3 years felt both like forever and like yesterday, and he couldn't reconcile how those two things were simultaneously true. But you couldn't say that to people. So Wade said,